Chapter 2. Press Gang. The Gazin's eyes had been watching him for some time. Now, the paralyzed Gazin cleared his throat experimentally and rumbled, "Louis Woo." Said Lewis. He had been thinking of killing himself, but there was no way. He could barely wiggle his fingers.
"Lewis, you wirehead?"
"Ungle," said Lewis, to buy time. It worked. The Gazin gave up the effort. And Lewis, whose only real concern was for his missing Droud, Lewis followed an old reflex. He looked around him to learn just how bad his situation was. The hexagon of indoor grass under him marked the stepping disc receiver. A black circle beyond would be the transmitter. Otherwise, the floor was transparent, as were the port side hull and the aft wall. The hyperdrive shunt ran nearly the length of the ship, beneath the floor. Lewis had to recognize the machinery from first principles. It was not of human manufacture. It had the half-melted look of most puppeteer construction. So, the ship had faster-than-light capability. It seemed he was slated for a long trip. Through the aft wall, Lewis could see into a cargo hold with a curved hatch in the side. The hold was nearly filled by a skewed cone 30 feet tall and twice that long. The peak was a turret with ports for windows and/or sensing instruments. Below the turret, a wraparound window. Lower still, a hatch that would drop to form a ramp. It was a lander, an exploration vehicle. Human-built, Lewis thought, and custom-built. It had none of the half-melted look. Beyond the lander, he glimpsed a silver wall, possibly a fuel tank. He had not yet seen a door into his own compartment. With some effort, Lewis flopped his head to the other side. Now he was looking forward into the ship's flight deck. A big section of the ship was opaque green wall, but he could see past it to a curved array of screens, dials, and tiny close-set windows, knobs shaped to a puppeteer's jaws. The pilot's control couch was a padded bench with crash webbing and indentations for the hip and shoulders of a Pearson's puppeteer. There was no door in that wall. To starboard, well, their cell was at least fairly large. He saw a shower, a pair of sleeping plates, and an expanse of rich fur covering that might be a Gazin's waterbed, and between them a bulky structure Lewis recognized as a food recycler and dispenser of Wunderland make. Beyond the beds was more green wall and no airlock, and that took care of that. They were in a box with no openings. The ship was puppeteer-built, a General Products No. 3 hull, a cylinder flattened along the belly and rounded at the ends. The puppeteer trading empire had sold millions of such ships. They were advertised as invulnerable to any threat save gravity and visible light. About the time Louis Wu was being born, the puppeteer species had fled known space on a dash for the clouds of Magellan. Now, 200-odd years later, you still saw General Products hulls everywhere. Some had had a dozen generations of owners. 23 years ago, the puppeteer-built spacecraft Lyre had crashed into the Ringworld surface at 770 miles per second. A stasis field had protected Lewis and the other passengers, and the hull wasn't even scratched. "You're a Gazin warrior," Lewis said. His lips were thick and numb. "Can you batter your way through a General Products hull?"
"No,"
said Speaker. Not Speaker, Shmi. It was worth asking. "Shmi, what are you doing on Canyon?"
"I was to send a message. Louis Wu is in the gash on Warhead, living under the wire. There were holograms for proof. Do you know what you look like under the wire? A marine plant with fronds stirring at the whim of the current."
Lewis found that there were tears dripping down his nose. Tange for torment, why did you come?"
"I wanted to tell you what a worthless thing you are."
"Who sent that message?"
"I don't know. It must have been the puppeteer. It wanted us both. Lewis, is your brain so ruined that you did not notice that the puppeteer
isn't Nessus, right? But did you see the way it keeps its mane? That ornate hairstyle must cost it an hour a day easy. If I'd seen it on the puppeteer world, I'd think its rank was high."
"Well?"
"No sane puppeteer would risk its life to interstellar travel. The puppeteers took their entire world with them, not to mention 4 farming worlds. They're still going hundreds of thousands of years at sublight speed, just because they don't trust spaceships. Whoever this one is, it's crazy, just like any puppeteer ever seen by humans. I don't know what to expect from it, said Louis Wu, but it's back. The puppeteer was on the flight deck, on a hexagonal stepping disc, watching them through the wall. It spoke in a woman's voice, a lovely contralto. Can you hear me? Shmi lurched away from the wall, held his feet for an instant, then dropped to all fours and charged. He thudded against the wall. Any puppeteer should have flinched, but this one didn't. It said, Our expedition is almost assembled. We lack only one member of our crew. Louis found he could roll over, and he did. He said, Back up and start from the beginning. You've got us in a box. You don't have to hide anything. Who are you? You may choose any name for me that pleases you. What are you? What do you need from us? The puppeteer hesitated. Then, I was hindmost to my world. I was mate to the one you knew as Nessus. Now, I am neither. I need you as crew for a return expedition to the Ringworld to restore my status. Shmi said, We will not serve you. Louis asked, Is Nessus all right? I thank you for your concern. Nessus is healthy in mind and body. The shock he suffered on the Ringworld was just what was needed to restore his sanity. He is at home, taking care of our 2 children. What Nessus had suffered, Louis thought, would have shocked anybody. Ringworld natives had cut off one of his heads. If Louis and Tila had not thought of using a tourniquet on the alien's throat, Nessus would have bled to death. I take it you transplanted a new head onto him. Of course. Shmi said, You would not be here if you were not insane. Why would your trillion puppeteers elect a damaged mind to rule them? I do not consider myself insane. The puppeteer's hind leg flexed restlessly. Its faces, if they showed any expression at all, showed only loose-lipped idiocy. Please do not refer to this again. I serve my species well, and 4 hindmosts served well before me, before the conservative faction found power to replace my faction. They are wrong. I will prove it. We will go to the Ringworld and find treasure beyond their puny understanding. To kidnap a Kazin, Shmi rumbled, is probably a mistake. His long claws were extended. The puppeteer looked at them through the wall. You would not have come. Louis would not have come. You had your status and your name. Louis had his drought. Our 4th member was a prisoner. My agents informed me that she had been freed and is on her way to us. Louis laughed bitterly. All humor was bitter without the drought. You really don't have much imagination, do you? It's just like the first expedition. Me, Shmi, a puppeteer, and a woman. Who's the woman? Another Tila Brown? No. Nessus was terrified of Tila Brown, with reason, I believe. I've stolen Harlorprilalar from the mouths of the arm. We will have a Ringworld native guide. As for the character of our expedition, why would I discard a winning strategy? You did escape the Ringworld. All but Tila. Tila stayed of her own choice. The Kazin said, We were paid for our efforts. We brought home a spacecraft capable of crossing a light year in 1.25 minutes. That ship brought me my name and my status. What can you offer us now to compare with that? Many things. Can you move now, Shmi? The Kazin stood up. He seemed to have shaken off most of the effects of the stunner. Louis was still dizzy and numb in the extremities. Are you in health? Is there dizziness or ache or nausea? Why so anxious, Root Eater? You left me in an autodock for over an hour. I lack coordination and I am hungry, nothing worse. Good. We were able to test the substance only so far. Very well, Shmi, you have your payment. Booster Spice is the medicine that has kept Louis Wu young and strong for 223 years. My people have developed an analog for Kazinti. You may take the formula home to the Kazinti Patriarchy when our mission is complete. Shmi seemed nonplussed. I will grow young? This muck is in me already? Yes. We could have developed such a thing ourselves. We did not want it. I need you young and strong, Shmi. There is no great danger in our mission. I don't plan to land on the Ringworld itself, Only on the spaceport ledge. You may share any knowledge we find, and so will you, Lewis. As for your immediate reward... What appeared on the stepping disc was Lewis Wu's Droud. The casing had been opened and resealed. Lewis's heart leapt.
Don't use it yet,
Shmi said, and it was an order. All right. Hindmost, how long were you watching me? 15 years ago, I found you in the canyon. My agents were already at work on Earth, trying to free Harlor Prilalar. They were having little success. I installed stepping discs in your apartment and waited for the proper time. I go now to enlist our native guide. The puppeteer mouthed something in the array of controls, walked forward, and was gone.
Do not use the Droud, Shmi said.
Whatever you say. Lewis turned his back. He would know he'd gone crazy when his need for the wire impelled him to attack a Kazin. At least one good thing might come out of this, and he clung hard to that thought. He'd been able to do nothing for Harlor Prilalar. Harlor Prilalar had been thousands of years old when she joined Lewis and Nessus and Speaker to Animals in their search for a way off the Ringworld. The natives who lived beneath her floating police station had been treating her as a sky-living goddess. The whole team had played that game, living as gods to the natives with Harlor Prilalar's help, while they wended their way back to the wrecked Lyre. And she and Lewis had been in love. The Ringworld natives, the three forms that the team had met, had all been related to humanity, but not quite human. Harlor Prilalar was nearly bald, and had lips no more everted than a monkey's. Sometimes the very old seek nothing but variety in their love affairs. Lewis had wondered if that was happening to him. He could see character flaws in Prill, but Tange, he had his own collection. And he owed Harlor Prilalar. They had needed her help, and Nessus had used a puppeteer's peculiar brand of force on her. Nessus had conditioned her with a task. Lewis had let him do it. She had returned with Lewis to human space. She had gone with him to the UN offices in Berlin, and had never come out. If the hindmost could break her loose and return her to her home, it was more than Lewis Wu could do for her. Shmi said,
I think the puppeteer must be lying. Delusions of grandeur. Why would puppeteers allow one of unsound mind to rule them?
They won't try it themselves. Risk. Uneasy sits the butt that bears the boss. For puppeteers, it makes kind of sense, picking the brightest of a tiny percentage of megalomaniacs. Or look at it from the other side, a line of hindmost teaching the rest of the population to keep their heads down. Don't try for too much power, it isn't safe. It could work either way.
You think he told the truth?
I don't know enough. What if he is lying? He's got us.
He's got you, said the Kazin. He's got you by the wire. Why aren't you ashamed?
Lewis was ashamed. He was fighting to keep the shame from crippling his mind, locking him in black despair. He had no way out of this physical box. Walls and floor and ceiling were part of a General Products hull. But there were elements. If you're still thinking about breaking out, he said, you'd better think about this. You'll be getting young. He wouldn't have lied about that. There wouldn't be any point. What happens when you get young?
Bigger appetite, more stamina, a tendency to fight, and you'd better worry about that, Lewis.
Shmi had gained bulk as he aged. The black spectacle marks around his eyes were nearly all gray, and there was some gray elsewhere. Hard muscle showed when he moved. No sensible younger Kazin would fight him. But what mattered were the scars. The fur and a good deal of skin had been burned off over more than half of Shmi's body the last time Shmi had seen the Ringworld. 23 years later, the fur had grown back, but it grew in rugged tufts above the scar tissue. Booster Spice heals scars, Lewis said. Your fur will grow out smooth. No white in it either.
Well, then, I will be prettier.
The tail slashed the air.
I must kill the leaf eater. Scars are like memories. We do not have them removed.
How are you going to prove you're Shmi? The tail froze. Shmi looked at him. He's got me by the wire. Lewis had reservations regarding that remark, but he could be speaking for a microphone. A puppeteer would not ignore the possibility of mutiny. He's got you by the harem, and the land, and the privileges, and the name that belongs to Shmi, the aging hero. The Patriarch may not believe your story, not unless you've got Kzinti booster spice and the hindmost's word to back you up.
Be silent.
It was all suddenly too much for Louis Wu. He reached for the Droud, and the Kazin pounced. Shmi turned the black plastic case in a black and orange hand. As you like, Louis said. He flopped on his back. He was short of sleep anyways.
How did you become a wirehead? How?
Said Louis, and, well, you've got to understand, and remember the last time we met?
Yes. Few humans have been invited to Kazin itself. You deserved the honor then.
Maybe I did. Do you remember showing me the house of the Patriarch's past?
I do. You tried to tell me that we could improve interspecies relationships. All we need to do was let a team of human reporters go through the museum with holo cameras.
Louis smiled, remembering. So I did.
I had my doubts.
The house of the Patriarch's past had been both grand and grandiose. A huge, sprawling building formed from thick slabs of volcanic rock fused at the edges. It was all angles, and there were laser cannon mounted in 4 tall towers. The rooms went on and on. It had taken Shmi and Louis 2 days to get through it. The Patriarch's official past went a long way back. Louis had seen ancient Thondat thigh bones with grips worked into them, clubs used by primitive Kzinti. He'd seen weapons that could have been classed as hand cannons. Few humans could have lifted them. He'd seen silver-plated armor as thick as a safe door, and a 2-handed axe that might have chopped down a miniature redwood. He'd been talking about letting a human reporter tour the place when they came upon Harvey Mossbauer. Harvey Mossbauer's family had been killed and eaten during the 4th Man-Kazin War. Many years after the truce, and after a good deal of monomaniacal preparation, Mossbauer had landed alone and armed on Kazin. He had killed 4 Kzinti males and set off a bomb in the harem of the Patriarch before the guards managed to kill him. They were hampered, Shmi had explained, by their wish to get his hide intact. You call that intact?
But he fought. How he fought. There are tapes. We know how to honor a brave and powerful enemy, Louis.
The stuffed skin was so scarred that you had to look twice to tell its species, but it was on a tall pedestal with a hull metal plaque, and there was nothing around it but floor. Your average human reporter might have misunderstood, but Louis got the point. I wonder if I can make you understand, he said, 20 years later, a wirehead kidnapped and robbed of his Droud. How good it felt then to know that Harvey Mossbauer was human.
It is good to reminisce, but we were talking of current addiction, Shmi reminded him.
Happy people don't become current addicts. You have to actually go and get the plug implanted. I felt good that day. I felt like a hero. Do you know where Harlor Pralalar was at that time?
Where was she?
The government had her. The arm. They had lots of questions, and there wasn't a tange thing I could do about it. She was under my protection. I took her back to Earth with me.
She had you by the glands, Louis. It is good that Kzinti females aren't sentient. You would have done anything she asked. She asked to see human space.
Sure, with me as a native guide. It just didn't happen. Shmi, we took the long shot and Harlor Pralalar home, and we turned them over to a Kazin and Earth coalition, and that's the last we've seen of either one. We couldn't even talk about it anymore.
The second quantum hyperdrive motor became a Patriarch secret.
It's top secret to the United Nations, too. I don't think they even told the other governments of human space, and they made it tange clear I'd better not talk. And, of course, the Ringworld was part of the secret, because how could we have got there without the long shot? Which makes me wonder, Louis said, how the hindmost expects to reach the Ringworld. 200 light years from Earth, more from Canyon at 3 days to the light year if he uses this ship. Do you think he's got another long shot hovering somewhere?
You will not distract me. Why did you have a wire implanted?
Shmi crouched, claws extended. Maybe it was a reflex, beyond conscious control. Maybe. I left Kazin and went home, Lewis said. I couldn't get the arm to let me see Prill. If I could have got a Ringworld expedition together, she would have had to go as a native guide, but Tange, I couldn't even talk about it except to the government. And you weren't interested.
How could I leave? I had land and a name and children coming. Kazindi females are very dependent. They need care and attention.
What's happening to them now?
My eldest son will administer my holdings. If I leave him too long, he will fight me to keep them. Lewis, why did you become a wirehead?
Some clown hit me with a tasp. I was wandering through a museum in Rio when somebody made my day from behind a pillar.
But Nessus took a tasp to the Ringworld to control his crew. He used it on both of us.
Right. How very like a Pearson's puppeteer to do us good by way of controlling us. The hindmost is using the same approach now. Look, he's got my drought under remote control, and he's given you eternal youth. And what's the result? We'll do anything he tells us to. That's what.
Nessus used the tasp on me, but I am not a wirehead.
I didn't turn wirehead either then, but I remembered. I was feeling like a louse, thinking about Prill, thinking about taking a sabbatical. I used to do that, take off alone in a ship and head for the edge of known space until I could stand people again. Until I could stand myself again. But it would have been running out on Prill. Then, some clown made my day. He didn't give me much of a jolt, but it reminded me of that task Nessus carried, and that was 10 times as powerful. I held off for almost a year, and then I went and got a plug in my head.
I should rip that wire out of your brain.
There turn out to be undesirable side effects.
How did you come to the gash on Warhead?
Oh, that. Maybe I was paranoid, but look, Harlor Prololar vanished into the arm building and never came out. Here Lewis Wu was turning wirehead, and no telling whom the silly Flatlander might tell secrets to. I thought I'd better run. Canyon's easy to land a ship on without being noticed.
I expect the hindmost found it so.
Shmi, give me the drought or let me sleep or kill me. I'm fresh out of motivation.
Sleep, then.